Hello. Hello. Hi, everyone. I'm You can never trust the tech. So I'm Dipali Trivedi. I'm CTO and co-founder of Everyday Life. Everyday Life is a B2C platform, is an insurtech platform democratizing insurance to the middle income families that is traditionally underserved by big technical insurance companies. And when I look back in last 3 years of my journey, I can, of course, learn so many lessons of leadership and resilience and persistence. But the main job, or one of the very important job of technical founder, is to manage the runway and manage finances and raise money. Yesterday, I was reading CB Insights, and it was saying that 44% of startups failed in 2022, failed due to lack of financing. And that number doubled since 2021 because market is changing. Like VC funding is drying up. It's half since starting of this year. So this is the issue on top of every tech founder's mind. And today we have amazing panelists who is going to share their experiences and insight to help them navigate this market. So I would ask each panelist to introduce themselves and share one of the scenario where they themselves ran into that, or they have seen a company that they are working with, like go through that scenario.
I'll go first. Hello, everybody. My name is Ali Mahmood. I'm an investor at Glasswing Ventures. For those of you who aren't familiar, we're a VC based here in Boston, focused on AI, cybersecurity, and infrastructure across the enterprise. So we have a B2B software focus, and we're investing at pre-seed and seed stage. Now working with a portfolio, it's quite interesting to see how the market has changed, as Dipali referenced. I actually started my career as a CPA, which comes in handy for this conversation and many other applications. No, I don't do taxes. I took a hard left turn into startup land, where I spent 5 years operating at the pre-seed and seed stage, where I fell in love with it. That's why I'm an investor now. But one lesson I think from those 5 years is every dollar counts at that stage, especially, and really think hard about what you're spending money on and what you can do yourself until you get to a point of failure. And, there's so many different applications, so many different founders with so many different skill sets, but lean on what you're good at until it doesn't scale anymore. And then you can think about buying that software, hiring that next FTE or that contractor, et cetera. I don't want to hog the mic too much, but that's one piece from my experience.
Awesome. I'll go next. I'm Janelle Gorman. I am CFO at York IE, which is somewhat of a venture capital looking firm. We invest and advise startups. We're actually out of Manchester, New Hampshire, so just about an hour north. And similar to Ali, we invest in startups, but then we also have an arm that advises them as well, and finance is one of the areas that we do that. So I work with founders a lot on this very topic. Excited to talk about it today. My background, still CPA. And so I think I was saying earlier to someone, I don't recall working at a company ever that was just so flush with cash, because I've always been working at growth companies. And so when you're working at a growth company, if you're sitting on cash, then you're not growing properly, right? So the whole idea is to reinvest it and put it into work. So I think the kind of first bit of advice or insight that I'd give related to that is, even as your company is growing and getting older and becoming more successful, and that number that you have is getting bigger, right? ARR, cash, everything just gets bigger and bigger. It's important not just to add on incremental spend, but to always be looking back and reassessing all of your spend. So rather than say, okay, what am I going to add for 2024 and assume that everything that you spent in 2023 was properly allocated, you should actually wipe the whole thing away and say, what am I going after in 2024? And what's the right way to spend for that? And that could require modifications in how you go about utilizing your capital.
I love that. Hi, folks. My name is Amy Sperling. I'm the founder and CEO of Compt. Compt is a lifestyle spending account platform that takes the piece of compensation that is typically a whole slew of employee perks, which are not taxed correctly, nobody uses them, low utilization, all the things, and makes it to where every single person can do something that they want individually. So you can say, hey, we support wellness, but everybody can do something different. So making it a lot more personalized. My background is that I'm actually a 3-time former COO, a 3 CFO, 2 COO. And so I've been in startup land for a very long time. None of my companies had money, much to Janelle's point. Nobody's flush with cash. One had 6 weeks of cash left when I joined. They hired me to sell the company. So that was, that was the job. But it was really every single situation was looking at where we were as a company, looking at the macro environment. I was a CFO in 2008 when things tanked then. And then assessing, all right, what are we going to do to stay alive? And what do we need to adjust? And so there's a lot of different things in each scenario, each company type, each stage, size, funding level that you need to take into account that I know we're going to talk about. So I'm not going to eat all the questions now.
Thank you all for your insights. So when a tech founder has to start raising next round, what is the ideal runway that is left for them? Like, is it they should plan a quarter in advance, 6 months in advance, and what should be I know it takes few months, few weeks at least to raise a round, right? So when should they start, and like what should be the closing date before they run out of money? Like, what is the right timeline there?
Yesterday.
It's always yesterday. Or maybe right after like my round close, I should start for the next one, right?
Not wrong.
I mean, it's always changing, and it kind of depends on who you're talking to, right? I'm sure that you'll have an opinion on this, but the more, the riskier the environment has been, the more I've seen like investors want more and more runway, almost to the point where some are like, it's almost like funny. Like if I had 18 months of runway, why would I really start raising funds right now? But that's what some folks are looking for. I would say like my rule of thumb would be start planning around 12 months, have conversations around 9, and like do not get under 6 months before you're like really like well into the process. You should be like probably having proceeds in the door by then. And if you get anywhere near 3 months, like then we've got to talk kind of direct cash planning and like what are we going to do now type of scenario. But it's so subjective. You've got to have a model for everybody, and then what your investors want to see, right? Ali, you can speak to that.
Absolutely. I mean, I don't disagree with anything Janelle said on the timelines. I think, do your best to not go below 6 months. That's when you have to have some operationally focused questions. Where am I going to cut if I need to? Just at the time when you're supposed to be showing the most momentum, going to your new investors and saying, look at us, invest in us. You should have invested in us yesterday because we're growing like crazy now. Well, that's hard to do if you need to think about cutting resources just at that time.
I think it depends on the stage you're at too, right? So if you're 2 people and you're trying to figure out like range angel funding, there's no way you have 6 months of cash. Like you're not going to have those kind of checks. The first couple of years when we were raising our angel funds, it was $25K check at a time, and that bought me, a couple months of payroll. And then I never stopped fundraising. And so I think it depends on the stage that you're at as well, whether you're angel, seed, Series A. As soon as you start getting towards post-seed and A, then you need to have more runway because you need time, and you have more of a team in place as well that you want to make sure that you're mindful of. You don't want to hire everyone and then fire everyone and kind of zigzag your team either. And so it's looking at your stage and applying those principles as well.
Yeah, one of the things, got to talk right into this, they said for the people at home. One of the things that we kind of always talk about too, and as I was saying, we do a lot of advising at our company, is trying to stay diligence ready, right? So you never quite know when an opportunities come on, or you're going to like, okay, you were saying we're kind of always fundraising, right? When you're on that growth path. And so you want to always have it in the back of your mind and always be kind of ready to entertain a conversation if you do close that great big deal that you've been kind of chasing, like, wow, that's some really good momentum. We could like maybe fundraise on the heels of that. And so we do a lot of work in kind of saying, what is it like to be kind of diligence ready, to kind of always know what your runway looks like, always know kind of what your next 12 months look like, or what you're going for in 2 to 3 years. So at some level, you're kind of always in like fundraising ready mode.
100%. I think it's also, especially in the early stages, as soon as you close around, when I started the company, I was talking to Series A investors. They weren't going to write a check. I knew they weren't going to write a check, but they need to get to know you. They're not going to meet you and then write you, a $10 million check the next day. You need to meet them in advance. And so it's courting investors from different stages early on, so they start getting to know you, they start seeing your traction, they keep tabs on you along the way, and they're interested. Because one of the other realities is that if you're a woman or a person of color, it's going to take you longer to raise. Like, that's just the reality of the ugly investing market. And so you have to be mindful of that and think longer term for how long it's going to take you to be able to raise those funds. Unfortunately, 1.9% of funding last year went to female founders out of a lot of billions. So, and 0.35% to Black women. So you got to be very mindful of the fact that not everybody's playing from the same deck.
I want to re-emphasize the point you made that it is very important to be in touch with the investors, even when you are not raising money, right? I mean, it's very important to keep them updated and be transparent with everything going on so that when time comes, they are ready to take your call and they are updated and it's not like out of the blue. So my question, another question, and we run into that scenario a few times, that when money is running low, like even though you didn't plan for that, but when it's running low, like where do you start? Like what kind of expenses you cut down, or how do you navigate that hopefully short-term problem of a low financing there?
I'm going to say it starts with first having visibility into that. I think people take this for granted. As a CEO, a founder, the buck stops with you, right? Cash is your lifeblood. And if you don't know exactly where your money is going, you're set up for failure. So I think step 0 of that is figure out where your money is going. Understand what it does for you, when it does that. And then from there, you can actually start to address this question of, okay, I need to plan for this contingency now. What do I do?
Yeah, I think that's right. And wouldn't it be nice if you could just say, okay, well, I'll save $100,000 and just like have that in the bank just in case. Like that's a luxury that we simply don't have, right? So you need to know well beyond like what's your bank balance, what's your actual cash story in the short term and the long term, right? You can log into the bank one day and there's money there. And then if payroll is tomorrow, there will not be money there. So just kind of checking in on the bank and like hoping there's a comma in it is not a good strategy.
Definitely not a good strategy.
So one of the other things, like we talk a lot about planning ahead and like high level forecasting and trend analysis, and those things are incredibly important. But I have a model that I call kind of like the oh crap cash model, and it's very direct and it's weekly focused. So if anybody ever gets into a stage where they're like, I don't know, like your client, you were saying 6 weeks, right? When you went on, like, okay, how do we survive? What does this week look like? What does next week look like? How about the week after? So I work mostly with B2B tech, like SaaS companies. So almost always the bulk of the expense is going to be payroll costs, and then other things that are like recurring subscriptions. So you've got like your Google monthly bill, your AWS monthly, you have payroll every other week, right? A lot of things are very predictable, which is great. Like inventory, if we don't have to deal with that, like take a breath of fresh air, because inventory is a whole different beast. And so you really can micro plan your cash. And so when you get into a predicament where you're like, I didn't see this coming for whatever reason, I think I might have 6 weeks, I'm not really sure, go down as granular as you can be and like plan out what the next 12 weeks of your company's life looks like. Cash incoming and cash outgoing, and then just pay incredible detail to it to make sure that you thread that needle to get through that 6 weeks and beyond.
Yeah, you start feeling like you're paying some bills and not paying others. And you start having to do some of that stuff when you get down to being very, very low on cash. You don't want to be in default on anything, but there are places that you can pay later sometimes. And so focusing on those as well. For me, it's looking at, to Janelle's point, the vast majority of expenses in startups is people costs, and it's headcount. So it's being so mindful out of the gate of how fast you ramp up hires. I think one of the things that is most frustrating to me as, former CFO, and even in this company where I've been pushed to hire faster than I wanted to, and I just didn't, was looking at, if you don't know, you can't just throw bodies at things and assume that it's going to be fixed. If you don't have product market fit, throwing more salespeople when you don't know what they're going to be able to do is not going to solve your problem. But if you raise money, a lot of times that's what you get pushed to do. And what happens is you raise a big round, you hire a whole bunch of people. I don't know what they're going to do, but maybe they'll figure it out. And suddenly the market hits the skids. You don't figure out your product market fit. You have a down round and suddenly you have to fire everybody. That sucks. And that happens over and over and over and over again. And it's taking people's lives for granted. And that personally I find offensive. So I'm much slower to hire. My team is much smaller at a Series A than most Series A companies because I know what every single person does. I know where they contribute to our overall ROI. And I also know that even though things aren't great right now on the sales side, I don't have to fire anybody. I don't have to do layoffs. I know that I can make it with this group. And we have a lot of runway because we're so tight and diligent on that. So I think it's making your money go as far as possible out of the gate and not just being like, woohoo, we raised, let's go throw a big party and hire a ton of people. Know what each person's going to be doing very specifically before you hire them.
Good. And the key question, right? How do you prepare for your round? Like, how do you know when to start? As soon as possible, I assume. But what all you prepare for that, like even before you start that, and how you navigate that? I know it's a lot of no's before years, and when years start pouring in, everyone wants in, and then you are like oversubscribed, right? So there are both scenarios there. But how do you plan for that?
I'll start by re-emphasizing something Amy said earlier, which is you have such an important relationship with your investors. It's akin to, it's a 10-year relationship, which can be the longest that some people have, right? Understand what people you want to work with, what skills and benefits they bring to you, to your company. It's a people business, right? For at least a lot of tech companies in SaaS, right? It's headcount, it's people building your product, it's people investing in you. Don't ever take that for granted. Don't ever chase money just because it's $1, right? Understand who's behind that. So I think that's a point definitely want to reemphasize. As far as preparing for your round, it starts the day you start your company, really, but you're always, as a CEO or leader, be in a fundraising mindset and understand what are the next milestones that I need to hit. When will I get there? How will I get there? And then assuming I hit that milestone, what are the next things that I need to unlock the subsequent milestones, right? So it's a blend of thinking about your 6 to 12 week plan all the way through your 5-year vision. Take some time to really, put those threads together in your mind and your budget with your executive team and have a plan.
Have a plan.
Have a plan.
First step is to have a plan. Yeah. And I always think, so much of it, I guess maybe I'm biased, right, from my seat, but so much is like, okay, we got to get a forecast together so that I can know how much cash I need to raise in order to get to XYZ ARR, in order to get the multiples. And it becomes this like really high level math game that doesn't make sense, right? I had a founder say to me once, well, I've got to double revenue because I want to do double, triple so I can like get to 100 million ARR. And I don't want to dilute past this, which means my valuation needs to be X. And I just doubled my expenses because if my revenue expenses doubles, and probably expenses will too. And I was like, well, that's not gonna work, right? Like, I love that story. If that happens to play out in that way, that will be wonderful. But that's not a strategy, right? You're not talking about product market fit. You're not talking about your go-to-market motion. You're not talking about your product development milestones. And there's no forecast in there to say, why are you spending what you're spending and how is that going to influence the top line and how is that going to be effective? And so I think the first thing really, because your financial plan and your entire strategy for fundraising is your entire company, right? It's the whole bit. So the first thing is really setting your strategy. What are you trying to achieve? How are you going to achieve it? And what's actually like attainable in the next 12, 24, 36 months? And then can you get your like superstar squad of, maybe you only have 3 people, maybe you have 30, however many you have, and say like, hey, product, do you align with this vision? Hey, marketing, hey, sales, hey, finance, do we align to this at the highest level? Yes. Okay, great. What's the next step then? Like, what are you going to go do product and what are you going to do? And as you start to build that strategy, then you can put dollars and cents on it to say, okay, well, what would it cost you to be able to go out and have that many meetings? How many leads would you have to get in order to convert to have that many meetings? What should your salesperson quota be? How many sales folks do you need? What's your pricing and packaging? And is the product going to be ready for that? And so it's like a million pieces that come together. And the only way you really can build it is to get that alignment on the top and then flesh it all the way down through. And then you'll figure out what are all the individual pieces going to cost you and what can they build together when you bring them all together. That's really the only time that you can come full circle back to say, how much do you need to raise and what's your ARR going to be, which tend to be the 2 questions that people want to answer first thing.
Yeah. And I think it's the dual path. There's the VC math piece, which is what in the first part of your example the founders are solving for. Because I know what you know. I mean, it's the double, double, triple, triple, whatever. I mean, it's great. And if you do that, they will be very happy with you. Most of us don't do that in reality, and it depends on your vertical as well. Like we're in HR tech, that's not going to happen. That's not the way sales work in our world, and so you have to understand the VC math side of it, but you also have to build a real business. Otherwise, you're going to build something that may get a round of funding, but you're not going to get to your next round. And so I think it is the dual path approach, unfortunately, which is a lot of work, and it's a lot of work on founders. But if you want to get VC funded, you have to fit into their models, unfortunately. So you got to do that math, but you also want to build a real business and have a very clear idea of how you're going to get there and the building blocks across. And so I think it's really important to, going through all those steps that Janelle mentioned. But so for us, I've always used an OKR system to where every single team has their own goals that are set. Those are, tied to the top level, company level goals, and it filters all the way through the organization. So we all know we're going the same direction, because otherwise some people are doing something, it's just too messy for me. My brain can't handle mess. And so trying to get everybody marching the same direction. But the markers you're going to have to get for your next round are probably something you could Google, quite frankly, like whatever industry you're in, whatever multiple you need to get to, whatever ARR, there are the one-offs, there are the Adam Newmans of the world who can raise $350 million on a napkin. That's probably no one in this room. Sorry, it's not going to happen. But the rest of us, there are predictable pieces of how much revenue you need to have for your industry to raise a seed, to raise an A. So you need to be mindful of that, because that's how you also are figuring out how much cash do I have and how much do I need. To give you an example, a founder friend of mine, unfortunately, this is not a happy story. So she raised money. She was very happy with the valuation. She raised $2 million at a seed level on a $26 million post-money valuation. So the value on her company was $26 million. And she was very happy. And I looked at her and was like, you're dead. You're dead. You don't have $2 million doesn't get you to the metrics you're going to need to be able to raise your Series A. You can't build to a Series A tech company. You can't hire enough people and build enough to be able to get to your Series A. So you just got a great valuation, and all you're ever going to get is $2 million, which is exactly what happened. And so it's making sure you understand and not over optimizing for great valuation, no dilution, when that's not going to give you enough money to get where you need to go.
Yeah, right. Would you rather have that, to your point on no dilution? Is sometimes people get so focused on the percentage, and it's I'd rather have a fraction of a percent of a humongous pie than the majority of a cookie.
Right.
Let's really think about absolute dollars.
The cookie that goes away.
Yeah, right. Right.
So, as you specified, less than 2% of VC money went to minority founders, right? So how can we change this? And is there any advice or any action that you can suggest to minority founders that they can do differently or they can do more of, so that they do not, first of all, they can raise money, and second, they do not run out of money?
This is super important for us at Glasswing. For those of you who don't know, we're a majority women-owned firm. We really take pride on throughout all levels of a company, from the board down to rank and file, promoting women, promoting BIPOC employees, and especially in the industries that I mentioned that we invest in. Historically, it's not. It's been a tough environment for women and minorities, quite frankly. So, as a founder, don't let that deter you. I know we have all the ink spilled about, okay, great. I think a few years ago the numbers went up slightly, but then stayed flat or went down, especially in the area. So don't stop. I know it's hard, but it's the reality. Don't stop. We're looking for you. Going back to my piece about finding the people to partner with, show up to the conversations, understand who you click with, and go for those people. That's the best advice that I can give. And then understand that fundraising, this kind of harkens back to the last question too. Understand that as a founder, fundraising is a full-time job. Period, full stop. Don't ever think that you can yourself push to it takes a village, and it's going to take you to execute that fundraising. really be cognizant of that when you're building your product, trying to close new deals, hiring, et cetera. Fundraising will take you away from your business. It's just a question of how long. So have a plan. Do a lot of things that we talked about to set yourself up to have a quicker fundraising cycle, and then go and execute that, knowing that it's going to be 110% of your effort.
We always go in line, but you can go second sometimes.
So I find the whole situation, the funding situation, pretty frustrating. I love the investors I have. To Ollie's point, it's finding the folks that believe in what you do and who will back your vision. You're never going to convince somebody in a room that isn't interested in funding you or has bias against you that they should fund you. It's just not likely to happen. So it's finding the folks that do believe in that. The other thing I think we need to do is I think we need to legislate. And I think there needs to be a big change. I'm actually working on 2 bills, one in the House and one in the Senate, and the Mass State House right there, working on some accountability in this area. And so that's made me not very popular in the VC community right now, but it is what it is. My funding's secure. But it's making sure that folks are being held accountable in getting rid of the sexual harassment that happens in VC funding. And then looking at the discrimination as well. It's not like only 1.9% of funding is going to female founders because female founders aren't starting businesses. Female founders start 50% of businesses. There's bias. I don't think it's honestly intentional. I don't think funds are out there going, hey, we'd only like to fund white guys. I don't think that's actually mostly the case. But there is bias that is at play, and there is change that needs to happen, and there is accountability that needs to come into play. And so looking at just starting with reporting, report your numbers, look at who you're looking at, look at the pipeline of who you're talking to and start working from there. And so we've got 2 bills up at the House. If anybody wants to learn more about that, definitely see me after. We're definitely looking for folks who want to join in on the cause. So I think legislation is going to have to happen before this actually changes.
My 2 cents are not as solid as that. I would just kind of echo what you said. It's really important to us at York IE to be investing and working with a diverse group. One of the things that we took on, and I think it just takes everybody to try to like move the needle, be impactful in your own space, whether it's at the State House, which is very impressive, or just like kind of in your own space. But one thing that we took on was as we looked at our investment partners, there was a lot of men in the room. And so not only do we need to be investing in women, but we also need to get women investing more. That's also an underrepresentation. And so what we kind of took on, and I think they kind of lead to each other, right? 100%. So we were talking about get to know your investors early, right? A lot of investing in this relationship building happens through networking, right? Oh, I know someone who's building something amazing. You've got to meet this person. And there's a lot of connection. And so if we want to get more underrepresented groups, then we've got to get more of them just in all of the conversations, whether it's in the raising or the receiving of the funds. And so we started a small group called Tech Women Invest that actually decreased our minimums so we could get more female investors so they can meet our minimums as a group. And then we can get them on advising engagements or board seats or mentoring some of our portfolio companies. Just get them in the conversation, get them top of mind, women and all underrepresented groups. So I think any motion in that direction is the right thing to do. And if we all take a step, that's the only way that we'll really kind of move the needle, I think, together.
I love that. One of the things that we did in our angel round was I leveraged AngelList as a syndicate. I didn't use it to actually get any investors. I just wanted their software. And I went and I found women who I knew it was like, look, your purse is $5,000. Write me a $2,500 check. Like put off the next purse. It's fine. And just finding people who had never written an angel check and getting them involved because it's scary. People who haven't angel invested don't know what it means, don't know what that looks like. They don't want to look stupid in the room, which I get. It's like, look, just test it out. And then we raised about $150,000 doing that and just shoved them all into AngelList and have one on my cap table. So my cap table is not a mess, but got a whole bunch of folks who had never angel invested in before and could write much smaller checks just to start testing it out. Because once they see that there is an opportunity here, they're more likely to write the next check and the next check. And that I think is really important because it's who's investing as well as like just the funds themselves.
Yeah, totally.
So when you realize that your plan for raising next round is not going to work, and you realize, I know it's that point, right, when you realize that you have to wind down. How do you approach that? How do you figure that out? And is there a lead way that you want to like consider that, okay, this before a month or 2 months, like what is the right time to think about that?
Yeah, well, there's a lot of like different looks of what is an exit, right? It's not only IPO or like a huge acquisition, right? It could be something as simple as acqui-hire. It could be pivot. It could be, like you said, go dark for a little bit and try again to try your product market fit, because we know that that's what you need if you're going to be successful. So if you don't have it, maybe you need to kind of back off a little bit. Move things around, see if you can find it, and then try again. So there's kind of different ways to have soft landing. So you don't want to say like, oh, I couldn't fundraise, I guess I'll just like turn off the lights, right? Like you can kind of see if you can make a soft landing at least. But I would say if your fundraising doesn't go well and you have that like moment of clarity where you just are like, a lot has to change here, we can't go on like this, go back to your strategy, right? Like don't just start saying like, well, I've got to cut all the people and I'm going to just figure this out by my own. Go back to your strategy. Now, what are you trying to do? Now that with the information that you have today, not fundraising, whatever it may be, what is your strategy now? Is it to keep the lights on? Is it to try to go for an acqui-hire? Is it try a new product that you haven't done? Whatever it may be, or just to wind things down softly and slowly to give your team time to find somewhere else to land before their paychecks stop. Figure out that strategy and then make your decisions based on that strategy, right? Don't like pull the rug out from anything, but like reset your strategy always. And really you should do that every year, whether you're finding success or not. Reset your strategy and build your plan up to that.
I would say like most companies aren't going to IPO. And so to me, it's always having plans A, B, and C at all times. And so I'm always fundraising, but I'm also always thinking about an acquisition. That's where we're venture backed. So you have to either IPO or you exit or you die. You have 3 options. I think I prefer the acquisition route. And so it's making sure that at the same time I'm courting VCs for the next round, I'm also thinking about who's corp dev, who's going to buy me ultimately, and what do I need to get there? And so it's always having multiple kind of plans in place. Like my job as CEO, I don't actually see it as, for the most part, building, like I'm not an operator in this business as much as some CEOs and not venture-backed companies may want to be. I'm a CFO by training, so I do run all the scenario analysis in my brain, but I also have a finance person who's helping me with the actual day-to-day closing the books. It's much more around how do we make sure that this company is going the right direction, is fully capitalized, and if things are not going well, like the sales market out there is terrible for any SaaS company. I don't know anybody who's killing it right now. It's ugly. And so what are the paths and when will be that moment that you're going to be acquired? So even if you're doing great, you still want to keep an eye on acquisition because maybe that's your moment to hit the market and get a really good solid exit before you raise your next round and your valuation needs to go up. So it's always working on plans A, B, and C in my mind. It's not just, well, crap, we couldn't raise, so I guess acqui-hire. Like you got to start sooner than that and just be very pragmatic about your business. It's not your baby, it's a business. It's not your baby, it's a business. It's not your baby, it's a business. Treat it like a business.
So before I started my company, I met with many tech founders to get their advice and mentorship, and almost all of them had fun stories to share that they were like just 2 weeks before they were to shut down and they found an investor or something changed. And so there are a lot of positive stories and those are the memories they carry. But of course, it's not fun when that's happening. But it was interesting to see that how many times tech founder come to that point so closely and still find a way, right?
Yep.
So that was before I ask other questions, I want to open it up for the audience and if there are any other questions for panelists that we can.
What are some of the, first of all, thank you, very enlightening. What are some of the biggest faux pas that you've seen for early stage founders? What have they made? What are some of those faux pas?
I would say like that like party and hiring spree after you get your check.
Oh.
Or
the party. The launch party is just
like maybe just celebrate quietly. you know, like your investors, right, are investing their money in your company today because they think you can do something extraordinary with it. And so, you know, maybe a party's okay. Maybe I'm being a little too, you know, I like to keep the budget. But I think the real takeaway is like, you're not investing to pay for what you've already done, right? So it's not exciting for you to be fundraising and like, okay, thank goodness, now we can pay back all that AP, or now we can, you know, I can get these 20 roles maybe that I need. It's really about the future. So when you get those dollars, it's not really a time to celebrate and be like, yay, you know, we can breathe and now we're all set. It's actually time to double down, get more focused than ever. Be, like you said, know every single role that you're hiring. If you're not sure about it, get a contractor and to see if it works. Don't test it out with a full-time person. So yeah, don't go on a spending spree right when you get your cash. Be super, super sharp with what you do with the funds.
Yeah. +1 on that.
Yeah, fundraising is definitely a milestone to celebrate, but it doesn't stop there. That's when the pressure gets turned up.
Yeah.
And I think a symptom of the past 10 years, call it, is everybody celebrated getting the round done. Yeah. And not like, oh, great, now I can relax. It's like, absolutely not. No. Now is when VCs are expecting you to do more with that money.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
I think it's me. I have a question, kind of like for a friend, almost.
Friends, sure.
Yeah,
Go
okay.
ahead.
You're in a safe place.
Amy knows. So I work with a lot of startups and a lot of founders, and a lot of them are experts in the domain that they're in, right? And so when the cash starts running low, they feel like they could supplement it or extend their runway by doing some professional services, or kind of like, you know, if they're in HR, they could do some HR. If they're in finance, do some finance. I'm especially curious from a VC perspective whether you think that's a good idea or whether you would view it as a distraction from like focus on the company.
Great question.
Fantastic question. Ideally, you sort out, you get more towards product market fit before you end up doing that. I've seen many founders start as, oh, I know this domain, I run a consulting thing, now I'm going to productize it. Great. Try to figure out the key questions first before you get into that situation. Now, as a VC, it runs against the VC math to do that. So you need to have an open conversation with your investors about, hey, here's the reality we're in. Ideally, they should know that. And if they're not, go get new investors next time. But think about first that plan with your exec team, your board, right? Everybody should be aligned on where the company's at, what direction it needs to go in. And then if that's what it takes, that's what it takes. But I think, it comes back to communication, comes back to a plan. Another faux pas, right, is like not communicating. That is guaranteed a way to get yourself into trouble, especially as it comes to finance, planning, and runway.
100%. Yeah, I'd say too, like to add to that piece where I've skinned my knees more times than I can count now. I'm, as we've noted, CFO trained, but I've run sales in my company. It's an HR finance platform. It would make sense that I understand our own platform, obviously. I've tried to add a head of sales, I think now 3 times. That has ended terribly every single time. We're too early for me to step away from founder-led sales. And that's something that it's going to take, like, I'm going to have to like have a VC with a bat before I give it up again, because I keep making this mistake, and I keep thinking, okay, we're at a stage where I need to bring in the head of sales, and I need to let somebody who's an expert at it. And then I watch them crash and burn again. I'm like, damn it, like learn the lesson already. And so I think it's understanding where you actually need to run it as a founder, and where you need to take space. So I brought in a head of finance, because yes, I can do all that work, but that was taking my nights, weekends, and all my time. Whereas what I really need to do is I need to go sell some shit. And so that's where I needed to focus my energy.
I guess I'll go next. Thank you for being here and talking to us. Very insightful. I totally agree when you guys say you have to be constantly fundraising, but I guess there's a time where if you're fundraising for too long and you haven't reached your objective, that might look bad. So what are your thoughts on that?
There's fundraising process, and then there's meeting people all the time. And those are 2 very different things. Your fundraising process needs to be tight. Otherwise you're overshopped and you're not going to get funded, because everybody's like, oh, well, I'll just wait and see who else comes in. Seems like there's something going on there. So keeping a tight process is one thing, but always fundraising to me means always
meeting investors. This is the first year in 22 years I won't have to raise a round, which I mean, I need
Did
to
you
know.
say 22 years?
22 years. I've done at least one round a year for 22
Wow.
years. No, that's not a good thing. You know how gray my hair is from this shit? Like, absolutely not. So I'm taking a break right now. This is the first time I'm not fundraising. But otherwise, it's always meeting investors for the next round, keeping folks updated. It's not an ask for a fundraise, but it's, creating the FOMO, right? These are the things that are happening. Here's the momentum. Only, telling them the bright, shiny things because you're in sales mode right now. Doesn't mean you hide things, but you want to highlight the stuff that's going really well. So there's 2 different time periods in the always be fundraising.
Yeah, it's also like kind of always being able to answer like an elevator pitch, if you will, right? So like, oh, what's your ARR? Really? Oh, that's cool. What are you tracking to next year? Have you gotten a bunch of key clients? Like, what have your wins been like lately? How's your hiring? So kind of always owning your story, where you're at today, how far you've come and where you expect to be going. You might, if you're like super sharp, you might have that with a really great finance deck behind it that also has that 3-year plan. You might have a pitch deck behind it that you're updating quarterly for your management meeting anyway. And so that's kind of ready to flip to an investor after a good conversation. But I think it's just really staying sharp on your story and your vision so that if something comes up, you can pounce on it.
I can tell in 5 minutes if you've done that prep work or not.
Oh, yeah.
Right. And that then puts a data point in my head of, this is a CEO who I'm thinking about backing. Are they prepared? Right? You can guess what I want the answer to be. And if you're not prepared, I can tell. Yeah. And VCs talk a lot.
Mm-hmm.
So odds are, if I don't invest in HR tech, I have friends who do. And guess what? I'm going to say, hey, have you met Amy? She's not fundraising this year, so don't talk to her. But,
I've done with that for a while.
Yeah, being prepared. It comes down to being prepared, and then ask for advice, get money, right?
Mm-hmm.
So back to the fundraising process. Have an idea, have a plan, have that ready to go, and ideally you're shortening that. But always be talking to investors. And this goes back to an earlier point I made. You want to be finding people to bring into your corner who are value add, who can unlock customers, talent, partnerships, exit opportunities for your company. That starts with these 5-minute elevated elevator pitches, right? And get from them, do you understand what I'm building? How much do I need to educate you? How much can you bring to the table, right? That's what you get out of these conversations as well, and leverage those.
Yeah, I think you can learn a lot about your competitors by talking to VCs, which is great because they're seeing a lot of things across the market, even if it's not customer or competitor specific, just they see across the whole industry, which I think is helpful. I've got a slightly more jaded opinion about the value add that VCs bring to the table. They do bring money, and that's quite frankly a very big value add. Most of them don't make customer introductions. You don't find a lot of that in my experience. It's great if they do, but don't expect it because they are also trying to build a portfolio of companies. Where I think that you have to be very careful in who your investors are is I firmly believe that especially post-seed, so once you start having a board, who's on your board, who your investors are will determine whether your company lives or dies. You can have the most brilliant company ever and a VC can kill it. You can have a crap company, and I've seen really amazing things happen with a mediocre product because there were absolutely exceptional investors around the table who could help you see around corners and think about things. And so to me, it's about who's going to make sure they may not understand everything I do, but are they going to kill this? Or are they like, where's the piece that I can live with that they may irritate me on, but here's also the things that they're going to help me see around corners on. And so understanding there is no perfect VC, there is no perfect operator. Where do you mesh together? Because that's going to determine, in my opinion, your ultimate exit.
Really quick cheat code on that too is do reference checks on investors by talking to their
100%.
Portfolio companies. The ones that are just above the fold on the website, like go deep.
Yeah.
And find the companies that failed
Absolutely.
And talk to all of those founders. And ideally, and we do this, an investor should say, go, you pick, right? I'll introduce you. Or fine, go completely around me, but go talk to the people that we've invested in. Understand what it's like to work with me.
And I ask to give me a female founder you worked with, and then they go, and you're like, wow, this is going to go really well.
Hi, and thanks. So we just raised our first round, not the
Congratulations.
super huge one, just thank you.
That's congratulations.
200K, which is kind of exactly at the point where it seems like a lot, but also it's so not a lot. You know, the runway is like whatever, 5 months. So I am at this point where, just like you said, it's the actual pressure, how to prioritize. And we are kind of days and nights talking about like what is more important at this point. And I wanted to ask what you guys would say. Of course, it's business specifics, but still. So like product development or growth or IP patenting. We are trying to kind of balance things out such that, you know, we kind of invest into all, but like it will probably be, there will be a point in time where we will have to choose where to put the money in. And we're early stage. So it's like our goal is to impress pre-seed investors on the next step with what we did with the money that we raised before. So what would be some advice for that?
I mean, it depends on your industry, and if you're are you in SaaS?
Yeah.
Don't do anything with IP. There's nothing you're going to patent in SaaS, in my opinion. Like,
Really?
no, everything's been invented.
And then you're saying, so investors would not even
No one,
care?
I haven't been asked about my IP in 15 years. Like, no one gives a shit. Like, if you are in biomedical, or if you are in pharmaceuticals, or you're in things that are like deep tech, robotics, like that stuff, yeah, there's stuff you can do. If you're in SaaS and it's a platform to make things go faster,
yeah,
chances are you can't patent anything.
Yeah, so like even algorithm or like business process.
Maybe it depends on your specific company, but for the most part, SaaS companies don't have an IP portfolio. Correct me if I'm wrong, though. Yeah.
Not at this stage.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay.
The way you're going to win is not by do you have the best algorithm or the best. It's will you out execute your competition
exactly.
that may or may not already exist.
Yeah.
Which comes back to the sales and product piece.
Exactly.
So I think long and hard, again, it depends is the real answer, but think long and hard about what are the next milestones that I just talked about with my investors, right? Because I'm assuming you did. And then think about how you're going to go execute those.
Yeah. You know, with family and friends, they're not professional investors. They don't necessarily even know what they want. They're like, oh, we like you guys. You're kind of like cool people, so we'll invest. So they don't really mentor you there almost. So we kind of like have to decide for ourselves. But yeah, you said product and marketing and it makes sense. Is it true? Can I ask one more quick question? Is it true that like the quantity of the like sheer numbers of users are not as important at this stage as the kind of like quality and the fit?
Depends.
Well, yeah, I was just going to add, I think the first thing you've got to go for is product market fit, because I think there's like a sign. I think it's like right there, like make 100 people obsessed with what you do instead of 1 million kind of like it, right? So what can you do in these early stages to get really strong product market fit? So that's a combination of investment in product and go to market, not necessarily sales, but go to market holistically to really understand like if you can lock in product market fit and get a couple strong logos, get really great references, the user base and kind of adoption and repeatability and velocity of your sales cycle, those will kind of start to happen as a result of really great product market fit. So that's the first place I'd put your very well earned invested dollars. Yeah.
Agreed.
Hey, I'll jump in. Thank you all for your incredibly useful insights, and congratulations on off fundraising. I'm jealous. But a question kind of more specific for you. In a story you shared earlier about using AngelList to find angel investors in a time past.
Didn't find them there. I used their software.
Okay, that was going to be part of my question. I was curious how you went about a process of identifying angel investors who aren't so public about it, or maybe have never done it before. Could you speak more to that?
Yeah, I literally went to just women I know who I know run businesses, because I was specifically targeting women for that, and women who I know have cash. And so and trying to make it a small enough check to where they would bite. I think the corollary is looking at people who like the space that you're in. So for me, it's around equitable compensation and folks in the benefit space. And so I specifically targeted women who had, were benefit brokers and things like that. Whatever your space is, finding people who are passionate about that space, who maybe haven't written a check, but a $2,500 check, you're not retiring on that. It's a good way to dabble. And so finding that angel round to me is the hardest round ever to raise. So there's light at the end of that tunnel, because there's no website that has angels. They're like, hey, I love to invest in these things. You literally just have to find people and prime money out of their hands. And so it's hard, but once you do it, after that, you start getting more metrics based and it gets easier as you have something a little more predictable.
Cool.
So
Thank you.
I just want to add one more point here that it will be really a lot of effort to really go after each angel investor. There are groups like Launchpad and many like MIT Angels. There are many groups where angel investors invest together, and that works so much better to manage your cap table and manage the pitch and everything else, right? Because they have a process, and that worked really well for us. So just to add that.
So that worked for you?
Yes,
That's
Launchpad.
fantastic.
Yeah.
It did not work for us. So that's awesome that you got checks from those folks. We didn't find angel groups to be remotely helpful, but I will say maybe there's a path. It depends on what you're looking at. They didn't like HR tech. That's okay.
Yeah.
That's fine. It depends on what you're building, what they like.
Hello, I'm Kevin. Thank you for your time and your insight. I was just wondering if any of you could speak to getting grants. If that's
Never done it. It seems amazing.
We don't talk about it enough.
Yeah.
I couldn't tell you much, but I'm always impressed by especially technical founders who understand either through their university ecosystem or wherever they're doing research. There is a lot of grant money out there. I do know that, depending on what you're building.
Yeah.
So, and it's a great way to prove to people like me as investors what you can do with capital. So even if it's a relatively small amount compared to what a VC check might represent, if you can build something, get in somebody's hands, sell, it takes money, obviously, but non-dilutive capital is a great way to demonstrate what you can do.
Yeah, it kind of takes a lot of research to see what's out there. So one of the companies I worked for, we had like a program manager actually like just be looking into this stuff and then applying and then giving all the documentation that has to go along with it. And then depending on how large a grant is, there could be reporting requirements or audits even. That's like really big grants, right? But the first step is just kind of seeing what's out there. Sometimes you'll fit into the grant perfectly, and sometimes you might find a grant that maybe you could like back into and be like, oh, I wasn't really planning on that, but maybe a strategy shift makes sense because that's kind of beneficial for capital and could help the business. So universities, small business administration, any groups like that tend to have good resources. Any like startup communities locally, sometimes they'll have more insight and trainings available on what grants are available. So I would start with groups like that, not nonprofit groups that might be able to help you educate or might be able to educate you on what's available. See if any are a fit. And then for some of them, you really got to plan a bit of time for the application process and reporting and make sure that you follow all the rules that the requirements of grant will have for you.
So we never had any success with the grant, but what really helped for first-time founder and very early on is accelerator, where they take some percent, initial 5 or 6%, and give you money and that bootstrap, and they bring the context for VCs and angel investors and give you like Techstar or even the DCU center. Like those really help because that really help provided that mentorship, initial money, connections, just to get started. Like that's all.
I can add a tiny bit of context because I work with a couple of companies that have done grants. It does not take any less time.
Right.
It takes an enormous time. I work with companies that have done NIH, DOD. I would almost say it takes far more time to do a grant. And then with all the reporting and everything, then
It's non-dilutive though, which is kind of nice.
Yeah,
that's kind of nice.
He's a free.
don't view it as a kind of like a shortcut.
Yeah. Yeah. On the accelerator piece, I think that's a really good point. I think it's finding the accelerator that's the right fit for what you do. I skipped over Techstars and YC, Y Combinator, because I wasn't interested in giving up that much equity, but it was also like VC introductions. Well, I've got 20 years of VC introductions. Like I'm good. I don't need somebody to teach me how to write a pitch deck. The accelerator we did was very specific to HR tech, and it was about product market fit and sales pitch in HR to HR people. And that was best thing we ever did as a company. And so it's finding the accelerator that fits your specific needs because there are some really interesting ones out there.
especially if you want to work with big companies and partner with them,
Yeah.
those specific domain specific accelerator really help you get in the
Love
door.
that.
It's very difficult to really find those connections when you have nothing to start with. Like you, especially if you're building a platform, you need those companies on one side and then consumer on the other side. You cannot, it's chicken and egg problem, right? So you really, that's where they
Yeah,
help.
they're
a lot.
fantastic.
We have 2 minutes, so super rapid fire question.
Yeah. Due to increase in interest rates, do you see an uptick in venture debt as an option to raise capital?
I hate venture debt. It's sharks in the water.
Yeah, as a VC, I even my opinion is be careful with venture debt. Higher interest rates definitely do not make it easier to work with,
No.
and a few of our companies have venture debt lines as a means of just having extra access to extra capital. And again, it depends what business you're building. If you need working capital and debt lines and raising debt, that's a whole different conversation than an early stage SaaS company.
Yeah.
But it's something to really not jump into unless you're fully aware of the ramifications of it.
Well, yeah, go ahead.
I was just going to say, it's similar to the conversation we had on the faux pas of like, don't celebrate, you got your check, now everything will be fine. Venture debt, like the stakes could even be higher on top of that, right? So sometimes in desperation of like, if I just had a check, it would all work out. You can get like maybe blindly optimistic on what happens on the other side of that check. And so I think with debt, you have to be especially careful because there's that additional
Pay it back.
expense. Yeah. So-
Well, I think there's like term debt, in which you can get from a bank, and then there's venture debt. Like there's entire firms where that's all they're doing is venture debt, and they put really nasty terms in their term sheets because they know you're desperate. And so if it's coming from a bank, it's probably a little bit different than if it's from a venture debt firm. That's usually my plan G for survival because is going to be ugly.
And just as a follow-up on the interest rates, do you see interest rates being higher over a sustained period of time? Does it affect early stage, or it's not a factor at all?
When's the econ panel?
I know.
It's where it impacts us is that companies aren't buying as much stuff as we would like them to buy. So even though it doesn't, like, I don't have debt covenants, I don't have things like that, it's impacting my buyers. And so it's going to have an impact somewhere across your ecosystem, even if it's not directly in my finances.
I mean, it's kind of by design, right? Like that's why
Right.
they use the interest rates because
Yeah.
they want it to impact everybody everywhere. So it's going to work. You're going to feel it if you're VC, no matter, or if you're at a startup, kind of no matter what stage.
Exactly.
I don't know. We'll see. I'll tune in with you. I have the same question.
I know.
All right. Thank you so much again, everyone, for your time.